Have you ever wondered how one of the youngest nations in the world, Eritrea, became one of the most repressive dictatorships? Nestled in the Horn of Africa, Eritrea is a country of complexities and contrasts, a land that is both beautiful and harsh, filled with promise and yet marred by struggle. As a country, it's relatively young, having gained its independence only in the early 90s. The year was 1993, a time of jubilation and hope. Eritreans were filled with dreams of a brighter future, free from the shackles of conflict that had defined their past. But alas, their dreams were short-lived. The beacon of hope that once shone brightly was soon eclipsed by a dark shadow, a shadow cast by none other than President Isaias Afwerki. A man who was once hailed as a liberator, a hero who led the country to independence, had slowly but surely transformed into a dictator. It's an all-too-familiar tale, isn't it? A nation's promising start overshadowed by an oppressive rule. The transition from hope to despair was not immediate but gradual, making it all the more insidious. The promises of democracy and freedom were replaced by a single-party rule, enforced conscription, and a clampdown on basic human rights. Eritrea, a country that was once filled with so much promise, now stands as one of the most repressive dictatorships in the world. A land where freedom of speech is a distant memory, where the press is censored and dissent is met with brutal force. And yet, the world largely remains silent. Eritrea, a country of over 5 million people, is often overlooked, its plight forgotten or simply ignored. But why? Why has this enigma of a nation been left in the shadow? Now let's delve deeper into the timeline of Eritrea's descent into dictatorship. Scene script. Who is Isaias Afwerki, and how did he ascend to power? Born in 1946 in Asmara, then part of the Ethiopian Federation, Afwerki's early life was marked by the struggle for Eritrean independence. His journey into politics began in the mid-60s when he abandoned his university studies in Addis Ababa to join the Eritrean Liberation Front, a group determined to fight for Eritrean autonomy. Afwerki quickly emerged as a charismatic and strategic leader, and by the late 70s he had formed his own faction, the Eritrean People's Liberation Front. This group would play a pivotal role in the Eritrean War of Independence, a 30-year-long struggle that would see Eritrea wrestle itself free from Ethiopian control. The war ended in 1991, and it was Afwerki, having led his faction to victory, who took the reins. In 1993, following a referendum overseen by the United Nations, Eritrea officially became an independent nation with Afwerki as its first and, to this date, only president. The initial years of Afwerki's rule were marked by optimism and hope. Here was a leader who had fought for his people's freedom, a champion of independence and self-reliance. The Eritrean populace had high hopes for a prosperous and democratic future, but this optimism was short-lived. Afwerki, once hailed as a liberator, began to tighten his grip on power. He systematically dismantled the democratic institutions he had promised to uphold, suppressed opposition, and stifled free speech. By the late 90s, any semblance of democracy had vanished. Eritrea under Afwerki began to resemble a military state. The nation's youth were conscripted into indefinite military service. Critics of the government were imprisoned without trial, and civil liberties were trampled upon. Afwerki's rule, initially welcomed with open arms, had swiftly transformed into a reign of fear and oppression. The promising leader quickly transformed into an iron-fisted dictator. What happens when a leader turns against his own people? This is not a hypothetical question, but a harsh reality for the people of Eritrea under the regime of Isaias Afwerki. The reign of Afwerki has been marked by a relentless onslaught of human rights abuses, creating an environment of fear and oppression that has seeped into every corner of Eritrean society. Imagine an existence where forced labor is a common practice, where countless citizens are coerced into indefinite military service. It's not a choice, it's not a temporary situation, it is a perpetual cycle of exploitation. This is the reality for many Eritreans, where the line between soldier and slave has been blurred by a regime that sees its people as resources to be used, rather than individuals to be respected. In addition to this, the Eritrean people live under the constant threat of arbitrary arrests. Individuals can be and are detained without charge or trial, their only crime being perceived opposition to the regime. Prisons overflow with the forgotten, those who dared to speak out, or even those who simply found themselves in the wrong place at the wrong time. Let's not forget the severe restrictions on freedom of speech and movement. In Eritrea, words can be weapons, but they can also be chains. The freedom to express oneself, to speak out against injustice, is stifled under Afwerki's rule. The freedom to move, to leave is equally constrained. Eritrea is often likened to a giant open-air prison, where the walls are not made of concrete, but of fear, censorship, and control. The plight of the Eritrean people is a struggle for survival, a daily battle against a regime that seeks to repress and control. But it is also a testament to the human spirit, to the resilience of those who continue to hope and fight for a better future, despite the odds stacked against them. The people of Eritrea are living under a constant state of fear and oppression, and yet they persist, they resist, they endure. Their story is one of courage, of resilience, and above all, of hope. Why has the international community been largely silent on Eritrea's human rights abuses? A question that haunts many. The answer lies in a complex web of geopolitical factors that have allowed the Eritrean regime to escape the global spotlight. Eritrea, despite its small size, holds a strategic significance in the Horn of Africa. Its location along the Red Sea shipping route, which sees nearly a third of global shipping traffic, makes it a key player in international trade. This, coupled with its rich mineral resources, has led powerful nations to turn a blind eye to the internal affairs of Eritrea, prioritizing economic and strategic interests over human rights concerns. The Eritrean government, under the iron fist of Isaias Afwerki, has been adept at leveraging these geopolitical dynamics. It has formed alliances with influential countries, offering them a foothold in the region in return for their silent acquiescence to its oppressive practices. This tacit understanding has not only provided Eritrea with a shield against international scrutiny, but has also allowed it to continue its violations with impunity. Perhaps one of the most controversial strategies employed by the Eritrean regime is the use of its citizens as a bargaining chip. The mass exodus of Eritreans, fleeing the harsh conditions in their homeland, has been manipulated by the government into a tool of negotiation. By controlling the flow of refugees, Eritrea exerts pressure on Western nations, forcing them into a precarious balancing act of managing the refugee crisis while trying to address the root cause of the problem. This calculated game of geopolitical chess has resulted in a muted international response to Eritrea's human rights abuses. The silence is not born out of ignorance or indifference, but rather a complex interplay of geopolitical interests and strategic necessities. The international community's silence has only served to embolden Afwerki's regime. The lack of concerted global action has allowed the Eritrean government to continue its reign of repression, leaving its people to bear the brunt of the world's silence. Can there be hope for a better future in Eritrea? This is the question that lingers in the minds of many. When we delve into the potential pathways to change, the scope of possibilities is vast. The international community, for instance, has a significant role to play. International pressure can be a potent force for change, especially when it is sustained and focused. It can help push for transparency, accountability, and respect for human rights. It can also support the establishment of independent institutions that can serve as checks and balances to power. Grassroots activism, too, can be a powerful catalyst for transformation. Even in the most repressive regimes, the power of the people can shine through. In Eritrea, brave individuals and groups are already challenging the status quo, pushing for reform and advocating for the rights and freedoms of their fellow citizens. Their courage and determination are a beacon of hope for a brighter future. And let's not forget the role of the Eritrean diaspora. Eritreans living abroad have a unique perspective and a valuable voice. They can raise awareness, mobilize resources, and advocate for change on a global stage. They can also provide much-needed support to their compatriots back home, helping to sustain the momentum for change. But perhaps the most potent source of hope for a better future in Eritrea lies in the resilience of the Eritrean people themselves. Despite decades of repression and hardship, their spirit remains unbroken. Their enduring hope for a freer, more democratic Eritrea is a testament to their strength and resilience. It is this hope that fuels their struggle for change, that inspires their resistance, and that keeps their dreams alive. In the face of overwhelming challenges, the Eritrean people have shown remarkable tenacity. Their struggle is not just about political change, it's about dignity, it's about justice, it's about a better future for all Eritreans. The future of Eritrea hangs in the balance, but the desire for freedom and democracy remains undimmed. And in this enduring desire we see the promise of a brighter, more just and more democratic Eritrea.